Thank you for coming and for sharing an hour of your day or evening with us. Before we begin our program, I have asked each of our speakers to lead us in prayer. Wase, would you begin?
Let us pray. Asa Mulungu, Spirit of the living God, we invite you in this virtual space. Be the unseen guest in our conversations today, as you have always been. Gracious and faithful Creator, Mumbi Ngaimu watu wangi, mold our spirit and give us courage to become the best version of what you will and what you want of us. Amen.
Susan, would you lead us in a prayer?
Yes, I'd like to read a verse from the book of Isaiah. You will go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and hills will burst into song before you, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands.
Thank you, each of you. Before we begin our program, I want to say a few words about the concept for this series. In this era of transition we are experiencing today, we need to explore the enormous capacities of women for breaking through and beyond the divisions that exist in our world: cultural, religious, economic, political, environmental, and technological. Today is the third of a bi-monthly series, Building Human Solidarity, the Voices of Women, which brings together women leaders in their field to share their diverse perspectives and experiences. Global Ministries University, Gonzaga University Institute for Interreligious Dialogue and Islamic Studies, and the Harmony Institute are the three main sponsors of this series. Other sponsors were listed on the announcement. These interactive presentations will be explored further with other significant topics of our era in the February 2nd to 4th, 2023 Global Interfaith Conference, Walking Together in the Spirit of Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti, which will be coming to you from 4 global hubs: one in Africa, another in Europe, one in Indonesia, and one in the Americas. Stay tuned for more information on this series and on our global conference next February. I want to remind you that you can write any questions you have for our speakers on YouTube. There's a place to list your questions, and I'll process those after our speakers give their presentations and have an opportunity to comment and connect with each other. Then we'll address your questions. And our program will be approximately 1 hour. So I'm going to introduce Susan Stephenson, and she will give our first presentation. Susan Stephenson is the Executive Director of Interfaith Power and Light. She oversees the Regeneration Project and its Interfaith Power and Light campaign. Susan has 20 years experience developing and implementing issue advocacy and electoral campaigns for environmental and other public interest organizations. Prior to joining the Regeneration Project, she served as Vice President of the Oakland-based campaign consulting firm, The Next Generation. Beginning in 1999, she organized and coordinated the California Global Warming Campaign, which implemented a proactive strategy resulting in several landmark legislative victories. Susan has been involved with California Interfaith Power and Light since its inception in 2000. Susan received a BA in English Literature from the University of North Carolina. When she is not at work, she can be spotted hiking in the East Bay Hills or attending a local music festival. Susan will be speaking on staying sustainable in the sustainability movement, offering her expertise and what she has found to be helpful in an area that many of us struggle with. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you so much, Marita, and thank you to all the sponsors. It's great to be with you this morning or this afternoon or this evening, depending on what time zone you're in. Thank you, Wasi, for joining us. And I am looking forward to our conversation. So I wanted to talk about staying sustainable in the sustainability movement, because it's something I know that so many of us struggle with. I do appreciate the space that you've made for women's voices, and I'm looking forward to sharing my perspective as a co-leader of an interfaith organization working at the nexus of climate and religion. We are experiencing extraordinary climate impacts and extreme climate urgency. We are facing extraordinary challenges, but also an extraordinary opportunity, I think, to reshape the world to be a greener, more peaceful, more democratic one. I want to share a little bit about my organization, Interfaith Power and Light, and what we are doing to build human solidarity, and why I believe we are in a Kairos moment in terms of the movement to protect our planet. I'll share some of my personal sources of inspiration and also discuss how we can use our vision to stay personally sustainable in this exhausting time. Your conference theme, Fratelli Tutti, is quite relevant to my organization. At Interfaith Power and Light, solidarity across faiths and service to the earth is our mission. We hope to even share that solidarity with all creatures and with all of God's creation. We know that we are part and parcel of creation, not separate from it. We humans across the world, across cultures, are deeply connected. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. put it this way: we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Or, as the famous conservationist John Muir said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. That is a lesson humankind needs desperately to learn. Climate change is raging around us. My co-presenter here is from Khartoum, and she's dealing with power outages as the grid struggles in the 105 plus Fahrenheit temperatures. I just returned from Boston, Massachusetts, which is the northeast of the United States, where it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit, breaking a record set in 1913. Here in Northern California, some of the oldest and largest trees on Earth, giant sequoias, are threatened by wildfires near Yosemite National Park. And in every case, we know it is the poor who bear the brunt. 7 million people a year now die of air pollution-related causes, according to the World Health Organization. And we are threatening the lives of future generations, those who are not even born yet. We know it's a global phenomenon. The extreme heat in Khartoum is fueled by the automobiles of Northern California, just as much as our wildfires are fed by rising CO2 levels spewed by coal power plants in China, Russia, West Virginia, by deforestation in South America, and by billions of cars and trucks all over the world. Yes, we are all culpable, though the US has been at this far longer than most and is the largest historical polluter on the planet. We also arguably have the most access to resources to make a rapid switch to renewable energy, if only we would find the political will. I wanted to share all this to demonstrate that human solidarity is an important part of solving this problem. Solidarity, to me, means unity, compassion, and understanding, caring that the light switch or air conditioner we turn on here in California contributes to the pollution being breathed by our neighbors around the world, as well as to drought and extreme heat in Africa. And what institution is more suited to this task of compassion than religion, for mobilizing us as a species to do what is right, not just for ourselves, but for others, to honor the creation. All our major world religions, and certainly indigenous ones, teach the importance of caring for the earth, of living in harmony, in balance with nature, of loving our neighbors, of not taking more than our share, and of thinking about the generations that come after us. In fact, here in the United States, successful social change has always required leadership from religious leaders, religious communities, from the abolition of slavery to civil rights to women's suffrage. When people began to hear about issues in the context of values from a trusted faith leader, it can change their perspective. Faith communities also reinforce and strengthen our shared values by providing a base of community support, a community that comes together in common cause to sustain each other's commitment, which is important since these struggles last decades or more. I would like to show some slides to you all. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully you can all see it. Is that visible? Marita?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. So, faith on the forefront of civil rights. Reverend Martin Luther King, of course, was a leader of the civil rights movement in America. And the sisters also, rabbis, other religious leaders, were major participants. The congregations and the infrastructure of churches were essential to its success. Here are clergy marching, saying segregation is morally wrong. Clergy leading the Selma March. And when I mentioned the infrastructure of churches, this was a really important place that women's leadership showed up. This is a picture of Ella Baker, who was a critical behind-the-scenes organizer and one of the co-founders of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Women were also, including religious women, were leaders in advocating for the women to have the right to vote in the United States. Let's see, where am I? The picture on the right, as you can see, is women marching down Fifth Avenue in New York City in 1917. The placards they were carrying were demanding the right to vote with signatures from 1 million women. Lucretia Mott, there on the left, was a Quaker minister and a force for both abolition and women's suffrage. Bringing us up to the present moment, or closer to the present moment. A little over 20 years ago, recognizing this power that the faith community had to influence social change, but not seeing a lot of leadership from the religious institutions in the United States, Reverend Sally Bingham, an Episcopal priest, founded Interfaith Power and Light. And here she is with one of those old-fashioned compact fluorescent light bulbs we used to distribute to congregations. But now Interfaith Power and Light has grown from just a few dozen Episcopal churches in California to 40 state affiliates, reaching more than 20,000 faith communities of all major religions in the United States. More than 1,200 at latest count of those congregations have solar on their rooftop, as this one does. And you can see they've got it in the shape of a cross there. And this is an important example for communities to see that their faith institutions believe that clean energy, taking care of our climate, is a moral issue. So also during the past 10 years, we've seen like-minded organizations spring up, including those with women leaders, and existing religious organizations have begun to talk about climate care and creation care in a much more forceful way. Interfaith Power and Light is a US-based organization, nonprofit organization with a mission to mobilize people of faith and conscience to take bold action on climate change. We've always been a woman-led organization, and a majority of our state affiliates are led by women. I think that's noteworthy since the two fields that come together in our work, religion and the environment, have been rather male-dominated historically. And I also want to acknowledge that many of the green teams, those local leaders doing the work on the ground in their faith communities, are led by women. And it's from those green teams, those local leaders, that I get so much of my hope. Here are the 2022 Cool Congregations winners. We have congregations who won prizes all over the country for their leadership on tending gardens, putting solar on their rooftops, some of them even installing electric vehicle charging stations, encouraging their congregants to drive electric vehicles, and also some of them reaching, we have 3 congregations now that have reached net zero greenhouse gas emissions. Here are a few of them. Temple B'nai Israel in Kalamazoo, Michigan, with their EV charging station. A historic Hispanic church in La Mesa, California, that jumped through a lot of hoops to finance and get solar on their rooftop in pursuit of zero emissions. And here's a really interesting one in Arizona, mostly immigrant church, an Eritrean Orthodox church that is working to build a community garden. And St. John's United Methodist in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that also distributes food through to the community. And they won the Sacred Grounds Award for their garden. So these congregations are not only greening their facilities, they're also delivering sermons. They're speaking out about the importance of taking care of our climate. This year, we had over 1,000 sermons delivered during the week of Earth Day, calling for action on climate. Oh, I don't want to get to that quite yet. We are demanding action on climate, not only locally, but from our national government. We have collected thousands of postcards, letters. We've organized hundreds of meetings with elected officials, and we know that there is not much time to act and that the US needs to act on climate. It is the most vulnerable people in our communities who are suffering the most. And we know from whether it's from extreme heat or whether it's from pollution from power plants. And it's the very old, the young, the world's poor who are hurt the most. So we have a moral obligation to act. However, political action does not always happen when and how we want it to. We had a major setback this month when the US Senate was one vote short of passing landmark climate investments that would expedite our transition to clean energy electric cars, while targeting those investments in the communities that need it the most. When we found that one senator from West Virginia would not vote for the bill, it was devastating for many of us who had pinned our hopes on that bill passing this year. We know that this is a rare moment when the stars align to provide an opening for the passage of such a bill. The last time was 2010, over a decade ago. So this is a time of anxiety and frustration for climate activists in the United States who many had worked for Biden, pushed Biden to propose a $500 million investment in clean energy transition, only to see it come within one vote of passage. So how do we resolve this massive disconnect from the world that we envision to the one we are in? How do we stay sustainable in this movement? How do we keep focused on the long game? For me, going to nature always helps. The day after I heard about the Senate bill dying, I was in Boston. So I went to Walden Pond, where Henry David Thoreau famously lived for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days alone in a cabin, where he wrote Walden, one of the most seminal conservationist essays. Thoreau lived there as an experiment in 1845 to 1847 to live deliberately away from society, consciously, as a spiritual retreat also. Thoreau was one of the American transcendentalists and a passionate abolitionist. At his cabin, he sometimes hosted fugitives from slavery. He and his mentor, Ralph Waldo Emerson, a Unitarian minister, were passionate abolitionists. They helped advance a new liberal philosophy based on the universal soul, on self-reliance, and on nature. This is his cabin site. His vision of the world was also far from his reality. Living here for 2 years, he thought to escape the immoral dictates of the world of the time and to live for himself to nature's rhythm, to find a way to live in harmony with the earth. We're still looking for that way. We need it more than ever. I visited Walden angry and frustrated from the setback in the battle to protect our climate, feeling that our democracy is failing us, that we seem to be losing the war. I looked at his cabin site, mentally reporting the latest bad news with hot tears welling in my eyes. 1847 was a different world. Nearly 2 decades before the Civil War, before the Emancipation Proclamation, Thoreau offered safe harbor to fugitives from slavery, disregarding personal risk. Some made it to safety and some didn't. He hosted abolitionist meetings that were organized by his mother and sisters. He continued to work for progress. Dying of tuberculosis at age 44, Thoreau didn't get to see the end of slavery, or even really the beginning of the conservation movement. You don't get the benefit of the long view when you're in the middle of a battle. So at this point, the struggle we are in for climate justice, for a new relationship with nature, we can't always see the long view, but we can hold on to our vision. We can focus on doing our part and know that others are doing theirs. The Talmud teaches, you are not required to finish the work, but neither may you desist from it. IPL's vision, Interfaith Power and Light's vision, is a stable climate where humans live in right and just relationship, interconnected with a healthy, thriving natural world. As our sisters and brothers swelter in intense heat, go hungry as drought decimates crops, and more of God's creatures go extinct, that vision feels so far away. But Hebrews 10 says, you need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. Isaiah 40 says, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will walk and not be faint. So I believe when we hold on to the vision, it can sustain us. In closing, I'd like to read a short passage from Thoreau. It's It's from an essay called Walking. Walking in nature is something that Thoreau believed was critical and did every day, even in the cold Massachusetts winters, generally for hours. This passage, I think, shows the opportunity that he saw for transcendence in our experiences in nature. And so, as we saunter toward the Holy Land, till one day the sun shall shine more brightly than ever he has done, shall perchance shine into our minds and hearts, and light up our whole lives with a great awakening light, as warm and serene and golden as a bankside in autumn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. A wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And now I want to introduce our next speaker, Washe Munani Musioni. Excuse me, just a minute. Washe currently serves with the Norwegian Church Aid, NCA, as Sudan Country Program Manager. Prior to this, she worked in various capacities in NCA, including economic empowerment, food security and livelihoods manager based in Darfur, Sudan, and as regional peace program manager covering the Eastern Africa region based in Nairobi, Kenya, and also as NCA regional gender focal point for the Eastern African region. Washe holds an MA degree in development studies, majoring in women, gender, and development from the International Institute of Social Studies, the Netherlands, and a BA degree in sociology and history from the University of Nairobi. She is a passionate Pan-Africanist with a desire to contribute towards an advanced and just continent. Her topic is Amazing Grace, a journey with women of faith in Eastern Africa. Drawing inspiration from the hymn Amazing Grace to highlight women's journey within Eastern Africa. She will speak on her interaction with women in different spaces and her engagement with women of faith over the last 30 plus years. She will focus her talk on the stanza, Dangers, Toils, and Snares. Welcome, Washe.
Thank you very much, Marita. Good evening, good day to everyone joining us this evening or this morning. 2022 marks 31 years since the day that I walked into Church House on Moi Avenue, Nairobi, for an interview at the then Women's Desk of the National Council of Churches of Kenya. And there began my journey with women, in particular with women of faith from Kenya, and later on with women from the Eastern Africa region. 31 years that can only be summarized by the words of the Christian hymn, Amazing Grace. 31 years of dangers, toils, and snares, but that have always been tempered by grace. And this is the theme that I have taken for my reflections today, Amazing Grace through the many dangers, toils, and snares. But I ran before myself. Allow me first to thank you, Marita, and your forum, and for being a vision bearer for this forum, and for the other people in your team. Thank you for conceptualizing this gathering and working so hard to make it happen. I recognize the presence of Susan, my co-presenter tonight or today. Even though we are divided by space and distance, I see and salute you. Thank you too to the esteemed participants for making time to be here on this session. In the next 19 minutes or so, I am going to focus on the rear view of the past 31 years of engagement with women in the context of voice and solidarity. But allow me to start with a story. And the story is told of someone who was walking on the beach and found a lot of fish that has been washed from the ocean up to the beach. And seeing the fish, this person started picking one fish after the other and tossing them back into the ocean. And another person who was passing by saw this as a futile exercise. And they said as much. Why do you bother yourself, he asked. There are too many fish that have been washed up. How do you even think of saving them all? But the one who was tossing the fish back continued to throw one after another back into the sea, saying, it makes a difference for this one, and for this other one, and for this one that are going back into the ocean. This story sort of summarizes my work with women. My work might not have a big impact in the grand scheme of things. It may not even be a big mark in the broader development arena. It is just a dot in the many diverse initiatives that are undertaken to give women power and give and return power to women. But it is my small contribution of putting one fish back in the water at a time. And for that one woman whose life is changed because of the work that I have been privileged to do, that makes this effort the more worthwhile. So back to the beginning. In 1991, when I was joining the National Council of Churches of Kenya, across the globe in the United States of America, the late Mary Daly, a radical feminist theologian, wrote about women and religion, and she said this, I quote, women who are committed into achieving liberation and equality have turned away from organized religion, which they see either as irrelevant or as a stubborn and powerful enemy in all what they want to do. Others, she however said, have opted to continue their relationship with religious institutions in the hope of changing the sexist beliefs, laws, and customs in these organizations. And I fall in the second category. I believe that the church and indeed other religious institutions, when thoroughly engaged, can become drivers of positive change. And so I joined the National Council of Churches of Kenya, fired with the belief that the institution of the church, which held and still holds a lot of influence, not only on women, but also with men across Kenya, could become a key ally in the fight of women's rights and gender equality. It was also a time of the World Council of Churches initiated and driven Decade of Churches in Solidarity with Women, 1888 to 1899, and thus a time of great optimism in the church, that the church would be, for me and many others, a vehicle through which our voices, our concerns, and our cares would be heard. And that the necessary changes that would be effected to better the position and the situation of women, not only in the church, but in society. Starting work as an assistant women's coordinator, I had the hope that the church, like John Newton, the author of the hymn, Amazing Grace, would open its eyes to the plight of women. And when I talk about the church, I'm not just talking about the institutional church, I'm also talking about the men and women who make the body of Christ that is known as a church. So why do I choose to use the hymn, Amazing Grace, and to be guided by its words, dangers, toils, and snares? I want to start with some facts about this hymn. According to Wikipedia, this hymn was published in 1779 with the words written that had been written in 1772 by the English poet and Anglican clergyman, John Newton. The There's a further story to who John Newton was before becoming a clergyman, but I will not go into the details now. So why did I choose the hymn? To start with, I chose the hymn because it reminds me that it is only by grace that I have had the privilege to do what I do. I choose it because it is by grace that the women that I have worked with and who are faced with so many dangers and snares are able to toil to change their conditions and that of their families and communities. I choose the hymn because it also happens to have a good and wishful melody. Allow me in this presentation to at times collapse the dangers and the snares in my reflections, as it is impossible to fully separate them. And I will start talking about the dangers. Working with women is fraught with many dangers, literally and metaphorically. Literally, we worked with women who are survivors of physical, emotional, and structural violence, women who have been caught up in conflicts and who have experienced sexual and other forms of violence. Work with women has included navigating culture, particularly practices that are harmful to the well-being of the total woman, including female genital mutilation, early and forced child marriages, widowhood rights, among others. Working with women, and especially women of faith, one has had to deal with religious and societal expectations, which place a lot of responsibilities and strain on women. Working with women, we have had to deal with the ever-present danger and temptation of becoming the voice ourselves, and in the process, silencing the voices of the women that we are set out to empower. Working with women, we have constantly had to deal with the danger and the possibility of not being true to the multiple levels of accountability. We have at times fallen into the snare of being only accountable to the people who give us money, the donors, and at times not being failing in our horizontal accountability to the women and the communities in whose name we raise funds and in whose name we are called to work. Another danger is to navigate, has been the danger of those privileged with education, knowledge, information, and resources dominating the scene and muting the alternative voice and the lived experiences of a large majority. Also, the danger of elitism within the women's movement, both within the church and society, where a certain class of women dominate and want to exclusively set the agenda. With regards to the snares, the pitfalls that mark the arena of working with women, one has to deal with many snares: resource constraints, both human and material, unequal power relations between the givers and the receivers, and the danger of falling in the snare of serving or servicing other people's agenda, where women issues are internationalized, but at the same time ignoring the locally generated agendas and the solutions that are based and emerge from informed lived realities of women at the grassroots. In the work, there are also snares found in the systems within and without the church that do not serve the needs of the majority, not just of women, but an infrastructure that largely marginalizes the voices and perspectives of many people of color across the globe, giving way to systems that are exploitative and extractive in nature, with the women bearing the brunt. When it comes to the toils, I take the activities carried out in our engagement with women. The first decade of my work, when I worked with the NCCK, was basically taken up in mobilization, awareness raising, and sensitization. The early years coincided with the structure adjustment policies that had been imposed on the African governments by the Bretton Woods Institutes, the IMF, and World Bank. These policies, as we know, had reduced the government expenditures and abilities to provide for its citizenry. Services most impacted were health and education, and this coincided also at the height of the HIV and AIDS pandemic. And in this regard, the burden of care, especially for the sick, was passed on to women. Also affected was girls' access to education, because as we know, when family finances are low, girls' education is not a top priority. So as a women's desk, we took a lot of work in financial literacy, training for women, raising awareness of how the global economic policies affected them and their families. And during the same time, we were also involved in national and international advocacy, lobbying duty bearers on the issues and showcasing the impact of SAPs on the poor and particularly on women. Also taking place around the same time was the 1995 Fourth World Conference on Women, the Beijing Conference. And our work here focused on sensitizing women around the conference action points, which later became the Global Action Platform for Action. We ensured that women of faith organized and participated in national and regional pre-conferences and contributed to the African voice and agenda to the conference. Ultimately, the desk was also instrumental in taking 18 women to the global conference in Beijing. It was also during this time that I learned about the journey methodology and the establishment of women's cycles to explore and interrogate difficult issues affecting women as women took physical journeys together. And for these lessons that I learned, I name with great gratitude the late Diane D'Souza and Homera Ansali of the Henry Marty Institute in India, and the circle of 9 women drawn from Kenya and India, many of whom have continued to be my support system. The second decade of my journey with women was to support their strategic involvement in peace-building activities and processes from the grassroots and engagement in formal peace processes. In this work, I had the privilege of toiling with amazing women, with the past and present directors of FECLAHA, Elizabeth Zimba from Uganda, and Jeanette Uwizie from Rwanda, who are instrumental in supporting the NCA regional peace program in its mobilization of women drawn from the Eastern Africa region. We engage mainly in enhancing capacities of women as mediators and peace builders. And part of the work resulted in the formation of the Regional Faith Women Mediation Network, which continues to work under the fellowship of the Christian councils and churches in the Great Lakes and Horn of Africa. Under this network, the women have sharpened their mediation skills and have been instrumental in various peace-building efforts in the region. Subsequently, the Regional Faith Women Mediation Network, composed mainly of Christian and Muslim women, continues to grow its national chapters in countries across the region and also establish linkages with women networks regionally and internationally. And this, I wish to acknowledge the role played by the South African-based organization Accord, and especially Irene Limo, in capacity building of the faith women. Most of these women have become members of the African Union Network of Women Peace Builders and Mediators, known as FEMWISE. The third decade of my work was more practical. I went back to working with communities affected by conflicts in Darfur, in Sudan, enhancing their resilience and recovery, and supporting their transition from conflict towards long-term development. Work that has involved working with communities largely, focusing on women to ensure that they are food secure, and being involved in supporting women in their efforts to mobilize on resources through activities such as saving and loan groups, and through the provision of inputs to grow their own incomes from small-scale businesses. I want now to share with you some of the lessons that I have learned in this work. The first lesson is one that I learned at the foot of my mentors, who to me became what Maya Angelou calls sister friends. The late Julia Mulaha of NCCK and Omega Bula of the All African Conference of Churches. And the lesson was that solidarity is expensive. It has to be courted, it has to be paid for in hard work, investment in time, energy, financial resources, and at times with tears. I have learned as true what is said, that change is not individual, but relational, and this is where solidarity comes in. Women's situation will only change when we work collectively, inclusively, and in solidarity. Isolated actions are not enough to shake the challenges that face women. As women, we must learn to work in contradictions. Sometimes as women, we choose to see things purely in black and white. We see working in the gray zone as compromising. But in the real life, we must be wise in choosing our battles and not rush out at everyone and at everything. I also have learned that development is a conversation. And through dialogue, women are able to connect and make connections that amplify their voices and build solidarity links. I've also learned that women's rights and gender equality will only be achieved when women have active agency and are empowered to voice their concerns, be part of the solutions to those concerns. I have learned that we need to break out of the silos that confine women issues only to actions by women, that women issues are societal issues, they are issues of justice, they are issues of rights, and they cannot only be left to women to resolve. This goes for building solidarity links with men. Another lesson that I have learned is the inclusion of young women in our work, to the need to institute mentoring and accompaniment of these young women as they venture in their journeys. Finally, the lesson I have learned is to share, and I want to share is being lifelong learners. We stop growing when we know it all. Let us open our minds and our hearts to the wisdom of the present moment. In conclusion, I wish to end with another story. Another story on a similar beach as I talked before. And on this beach was littered the corpses and as well as some people who were injured. And a person who was walking on this beach, seeing these mobilized people to take the injured to the hospital and to help bury the dead. Having done that, they were very happy that they had indeed helped the situation. The next day and the days after, the person was, however, met with a similar scenario. More injured people, some dying on the same beach beneath a cliff. And someone else passing by suggested that they needed to go up the cliff above the sea to see where and what was causing the people to fall to their deaths and to be injured, and to solve the problem from the source. I conclude with this story, not to discourage us, but to say that the journey is not yet over. Women still need support in their journey or journeys as they toil towards full gender equality and the attainment of their rights. This is what is up the cliff. It is therefore my prayer and hope that grace will take us up that cliff and give us voice to voice the issues that impact on women and to be part of the solution to the many challenges that lie ahead. And as we go up that cliff, remember to surround yourself with people who care. Mine have been first my family and close friends, and the many women that I have encountered who have not only supported me, but held me accountable. But above all, learn to self-care. This work can be draining. And I will end by paraphrasing my favorite stanzas from the hymn, but I have substituted I with we and me with us, because the work that we do is for us all. And so I will say, the Lord has promised good to us. His word, our hope secures. He will our shield and portion be as long as our life endures. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. It is grace that has brought us this far, and it is grace that will lead us home. May the amazing grace continue to be with us and to give us voice. I wish us strength. I wish us grace. I wish us sisterhood, solidarity, and peace. Nemubea. Asanteni sana. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wasi. Now, I want to give you both an opportunity to interact with each other, Susan and Washi. So we'll take a couple of minutes for you to do that. And I'll leave it up to you who starts first or what you want to share.
Well, since Washi's just finished, if I could reflect on something that you said, or kind of one of your themes, Washi, was, with the examples you gave of, well, this fish, it makes a difference to this one. And then also the importance of localized solutions, local-based agendas. I wondered if you could share some of the tension between, and what are some of the local solutions that you're advocating for that maybe are not getting lifted up at the international level that need in the way they need to be, and how can we support you in advocating for those?
Thank you very much, Susan, for your question. And I think I would want to answer your question also by posing a similar question, because in your sharing, you talked about the urgency of the moment of saving the world from ourselves. And we know that very much one of the big challenges of climate change, the effect is mostly felt in the African and in the global South. And therefore, one of the things that probably we would like to see lifted in the international arena is the effects of what you've just spoken about, the effect of climate change. Often we know that the people who are the biggest polluters are from the global North, but the people who are bearing the brunt are from the global South. And therefore, that is one of the areas that I would highlight. The other area that I would highlight is about resources. We know that much of the work that we do is supported by external resources, and these resources often come with strings attached. And these strings attached are very, they put the women issues in silos, like I said before. So on one hand, you're dealing with women and climate, another one you're dealing with women and health, another one. But we know that people are holistic. And therefore, it's just to open up the debate that as we give resources to support work in the global South, that the voice of the people who are mostly affected by the issues that need to be addressed take prominence. Thank you.
Great. Yes, very important. And one of the things the U.S. is very behind on is paying into the Green Climate Fund, just to support communities in the global South that are bearing the brunt of climate impacts, and also to help them with funding to transition to clean energy. And so that's something we certainly push for, advocate for with the Biden administration, to come up with the rest of the U.S., what the U.S. has already pledged, and to do more. And then just on a small scale, I'll just, one of the small partnerships we've been honored to participate in with Interfaith Power Light in the global South is partnering with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania, which is reforesting the slopes of Tanzania. And so many women working in that, tree planting. We know deforestation is one of the biggest impacts and also causes of climate change that affects the global South. So we've been supporting that project, and our supporters have been able to make donations from their churches, from their congregations, specifically to support these tree planting efforts in the global South, led by faith communities and led by women. So if we could have all of that type of thing funded on a much larger scale by governments around the world, I think we'd be doing better.
Thank you very much, Susan. I wanted to say that just to thank you very much for reminding us that the world needs saving, and each of us have got a personal responsibility towards this. As we said at the beginning, I am based in Sudan, and it is said that the Sahara Desert is moving very fast and consuming a lot of space. And if nothing is done, very soon, the communities that live in the Sahel region are going to be adversely affected. They are already adversely affected. And therefore, I want to thank you very much for reminding us and also sharing with us the efforts that are being done by individual congregations and also by individuals in your space. I really don't have a question for you, but just to say thank you and encourage you in the work that you're doing. Thank you very much.
we are getting many, shall I say, forms of applause for each and both of you. Words like great job, very inspiring. You keep us going. Well done. And on it goes. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Washe, is if you could say a little bit more about the training of women as peace mediators. Could you do that in maybe a little bit of concrete detail?
Yes. In 2015, the Norwegian Church Aid Regional Peace Program, Eastern Africa region, started a process of bringing women or mobilizing women so that they can be part of the peace processes in the region. As we know, the Eastern Africa region has been a theater of conflict in the recent years. And the voice of women and the participation of women have been marginalized in many of these processes. And so we started off by mobilizing different cohorts of women drawn from 12 countries in the Horn of Africa and trained them as trainers. And these women were able to go back to their countries and cascade down the training at different levels, at national level, at regional level, at regions, within regions in the country, in the countries of origin. And like I said in my presentation, we have had many chapters emerging in the different countries where women have continued the work that we started in 2015. An example that I would give is the women in South Sudan who on a monthly basis are marching in the streets of Juba, calling for peace between the people who are involved, the different parties involved in the conflict in Sudan, in South Sudan. I would also want to talk about the women in DRC, the women in Uganda, the women in Burundi, the Kenyan women who are now working hard around the upcoming elections, trying to mobilize the communities so that they can contribute to a peaceful election. So we have different examples of what the training that was given to these women has resulted in. And that is why I talk about the amazing grace that has accompanied the women in the work that they do.
Wonderful, thank you. I was wondering, Susan, if there's any, I guess, you know, this challenge of creating a sustainable earth is so challenging. And you talked about how you renewed yourself at a critical moment when the vote went down in the Senate. And I'm wondering, do you, does your core team at Interfaith Power and Light have ways that you restore, you come together to renew yourselves as a circle of leadership or as the team, you know, the secretaries, everyone? Is there a way that you plan for time to nourish one another or to be nourished?
Well, we certainly encourage that. We do have staff get-togethers and staff outings where we get out in nature. We had one a few months ago where we went hiking together as a team, and that was really wonderful. We have people all over the country now, and some people were able to come to California for the first time and to see redwood trees for the first time. That was really nice. And, you know, we also share these kind of reflections and in our staff meetings with each other. And we certainly, you know, encourage everyone to experience nature as much as they can, and even to take some, you know, these difficult times, to take an afternoon off and restore yourself. I do think that nature is so restorative.
Thank you. I say that having led a team for our diocese. I just stepped aside and am a committee meeting member, but we work so hard and sometimes there's very little progress. And I find if we keep task focused, we're burning ourselves out. And so it is so important. We plan a mini retreat day where we come together in silence and share the things that inspire us. But I think both of you emphasize self-care, and I think community care is also important in the circles of leadership, because there's so much to do, and sometimes we focus only on the task or the partnerships or how can we move this forward. I do want to thank both of you so much. We've come to the end of our hour, and one of the things that's occurring to me is how to incorporate what you have both shared in our upcoming global conference in ways that can both support people and can inspire people to begin projects that you're involved with or to partner with you. So I'm going to give that more thought and bring it to our international planning team. But I want to thank you both so much. And I speak for many people who continue to say, so powerful, congratulations, well done, great job. So thank you both so much. And I will send you information on the website, or it's actually a channel on YouTube where you can share this program. Goodbye to everyone, and thank you for joining us from around the world. Bye-bye.
Good night.